Hello, welcome to another episode of the Green Room. Um, John Bloom, Scott McIntyre, welcome Sean Albertson, somebody that's a fellow kind of CX industry expert, if you will, I would say. Welcome, Sean.
We're
Welcome.
glad I'm able here to join you guys, and looking forward to the conversation today. I think it's gonna be great.
Awesome.
Great. So every now and then we'd like to have people that, especially in the CX industry that know the industry quite well. And I ran into Sean about a month ago doing some research in Colorado, and found one of his organizations and saw that he is not only a CX expert but a CX author. So Sean, maybe you can give us a little bit of a background on yourself and what your books are all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a high level. I mean, I've been in CX longer than it was called CX, and back in the 1900s, which is kind of crazy to say, right? 25, getting closer to 30 years now of time. And I did start, like a lot of CX, more in the contact center and customer service, and then moved in my career through digital transformations. All the research and analytics and IT work. I mean, I did kind of CX from all sorts of places in the organization. And I always found that, customer experience is very misunderstood. And in many cases, especially when you go to the executive level, it theoretically, everybody's like, oh yeah, CX, it's so important. And then, functionally, when it's really, needs to be implemented, that there's a misunderstanding of that. And so, I'm here helping organizations now as a professional speaker and an independent consultant. My first couple of books, you can see behind me over here, Four Rocks was the first book. Is really about the customer journey. And I'll talk a little more about that. And then Alignment on the Rocks is really what I see as the core challenge for CX and many business groups, is lack of alignment in the organization. But this rocks thing, where does this come from? It really comes from the idea that says we like to think the customer experience, that we're designing is nice, smooth, easy flow, and the reality is it's anything but. I translate that journey to like a river, and it is full of class 5 rapids, unfortunately, today, because things are so much more complex. And so customers are hitting our rocks, our business rocks, poorly trained agents, systems that don't work right. I mean, all those different things that can get in the way, and it causes their journey to be harder. And from that, as John, you and Scott know, it creates, disconnect between the promises of loyalty and the actions that happen every day. And it becomes one of those areas that customers leave the harder the journey is if they're on. So
Yeah, what's funny about that is I think organizationally, John and I have been into hundreds of companies, and have done assessments in the CX space or around the CX space. And the one thing that comes up more often than anything else is organizational barriers. You have 5, 6, 7 different verticals of business owning parts of the contact center, and they all want different things, right? So trying to design something that satisfies the brand or the company as a whole, you run into, well, I don't want to spend the money on that. This organization doesn't want to spend the money on this. One of the organizations wants to do chat, somebody else doesn't. Someone wants a service level of X and someone wants a service level of Y, and they just can't get agreement. And more often than not, they just don't talk to each other.
yeah.
Do you find that's the case?
Oh, absolutely. Silos, and there's usually nothing nefarious about it. I mean, people aren't like out to get each other, right? It's just a matter of, if I've got a boss and my boss is focused on, a certain part of business, let's say the website or the mobile app or, any of those other, channels, I just focus on that, and those metrics don't necessarily align. And so the reality is, as I talk about in Alignment on Rocks, that misalignment across those layers, those silos, it becomes the area of ultimate failure for most organizations. And the more they grow, in many cases, the faster they grow, the worse it becomes. Add in other things like, mergers and acquisitions and cultural challenges. Now it just starts to, create even more of a challenge. And when I look and when I work with companies, as I consult, there's a lot of focus on, opening communication, bridging the gap between, and getting them to really understand the fact that they all touch the customer journey, in some form. So they have to be a part of that. And they can't just, marketing even just can't say, oh, that's a service thing. That's a downstream. We're not going to worry about that. Well, the brand promise you deliver from a marketing standpoint and the communication, that's still part of the journey. and really understanding how to bring them those different groups together is, I mean, it's an art and a science, because every organization is going to be different, and have
Right.
different different underlying beliefs and challenges and culture and things of that nature. But it's a big part of where I see customer experience spending a lot more time now in that space than even on the traditional, like, call center
Yeah.
or different chat channels and things like that, than anything else. It's becoming more of a culture and strategy play than anything else.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think having a deliberate and intentional customer experience kind of roadmap, or this outline of organizationally you're tying into your 100,000 foot brand message and what the promises you make to your customers, that should be shared across the whole organization and repeatedly deliberate, right? And yet it feels like, lack of a better analogy, like the football receivers that take the kickoff or the punt, right? It shouldn't just be this, I hope they kick it to me so I can catch it kind of a thing. It should be very deliberate. And I think that's one of the evolution pieces that Scott and I have seen since we've gotten into the business back in 2009. And even before then, of was much more, it was easier to kind of compartmentalize and be deliberate about that experience. And now with more stakeholders, I think, and to your point, the misalignment around kind of what drives, the individual responsibilities of each of those departments. It just seems like that deliberate, intentional kind of experience is being lost, and yet the ones that do it really well are the ones that are differentiating and doing better. Who's a good brand that you see as doing it really well right now, Sean?
Well, honestly, I one of the things I'm seeing some good stuff. I mean, it's not as common as I think you'd really like to
Right,
expect to see, right?
right.
Unfortunately, what I see more is different organizations do well in certain areas.
Hmm.
From
That's
that
probably a good way
perspective,
of looking
and
at it. Yeah.
yeah, and I work with a lot of banks and financial institutions, and they seem to connect, at much higher levels, because I think they get and understand that, the client, the customer, their money is at the core of what they do,
Hmm.
and it's so important. And so they're upshifting and up leveling. In fact, I think financial services and banking industries are one of the few where I'm seeing an increase
Yeah.
in customer experience roles and leadership and executives even, whereas in others I see it going away.
Right.
And it's this dichotomy. But I really want to hit what you were saying, because just think about what everyone's dealing with right now. It's like, you know go get me an AI strategy, said every CEO right now, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
and that's exactly where the challenge is, because you talked about it. They're thinking more short term and shallow, and therefore, because of that, they're chasing the shiny object. They're saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, let's do a chatbot to reduce calls. Let's do something like that to improve the experience." But really, it's kind of more of an efficiency play. What they don't have is that North Star. They don't have that real vision of what they want to be to their consumers, to then evaluate what type of AI, for instance, might work
Right.
better for that strategy. Flipping that model to say, you need a strategy, then you can consider how AI will help you, versus I need to get an AI strategy. That's the wrong,
Right.
statement for most CEOs to make. And yet it's extremely common, because,
Right.
with economic stuff that's going on and everything else, everything's being about cost reduction and cost containment. And, because of the pending, X, Y, and Z recession or whatever you want to talk
Right.
about, it's become a misaligned, strategy for most organizations.
Yeah, if you think about how AI has driven the marketing splash of AI has driven a cottage industry in universities and schools, business that can spin up an application without any kind of performance or growth, or hey, we've got X million interactions going through it before they're being sold. Like this is like such a strange kind of time where I think there was a vacuum that was created, and not AI wasn't made for CX, but we're trying to compartmentalize it and bring it in and write it into the story. And yet, again, to your point, like every CEO is on the picket line going, when do we want AI? We want it now. It's like that kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
all of these things just create more of a wash. And I think the stability of, to your point, that true north on the compass around, hey, if you haven't defined your true destination customer experiences is what we call it. That might be a great place to start. So you can ask the why. Why would we want AI now instead of, hey, let's buy some technology, force fit it in, get some gains off of it from a financial perspective, maybe as a one time, we cut some staff and did some automation. But in all reality, it just doesn't match anything that comes from their brand promise to the employees writing themselves into that story to, greater performance down the road.
Yeah. Well, you got to figure there's layers, right? Strategic layers within most organizations, one being the North Star. It is that what do you want to be when you grow up as an organization? What do you want to drive for the customer? I call that the core of the organization, mission, vision, values, and are they real or are they just on paper and et cetera? And, and then when you look at it, it's getting to the level of, all right, well, we've got to have ROI if an AI, because everybody is quoting this, right? MIT said 95% of all AI projects are not delivering.
Right.
You get a big number like that, and everybody's gonna quote it like crazy, and we are. And in a general sense, 70% of most business transformations fail, whether it's AI or not. So it's a problem when we think about we need to evolve, during this time, which we do. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We're going to have to evolve because otherwise we'll get left behind in this context. So understanding that, what I'm finding, for instance, is where my two books kind of come in. It's this understanding that I'm seeing a resurgence, if you will, a reinvention, if you will, even of the journey mapping kind of programs, the ability to really sit down and look at various journeys of the customer. And I'm not talking high level, like, consider buy service, I'm not talking that. I'm talking journeys that take the customer multiple steps and multiple activities and key moments of truth from that perspective. Because my own company's research shows that if something's hard to do, if a customer journey is hard, then the customer is 13 times more likely to be disloyal. That's huge. But the only way you can make things easy is if you really understand the journey they're on. And so being able to understand that, and then through that journey, exercise, being able to go into more of from journey mapping to journey management and journey design, now you can actually pinpoint, say, all right, we need AI here, and it's going to work really well. So you're thinking at that higher level of what do we want to be, how do we want to serve our customers, to now, what does that journey look like? And more importantly, what does it feel like to the customers? And then be able to look at that and say, all right, now I've got an ROI. Because if you go into more generic, we're going to reduce costs with an AI chatbot or something like that, that's when the 95 hits. You're not going to be able to do that. But if you can get very specific enough where it's actual and it's a true moment of truth for the customer, that if you don't get it right, you're going to lose them. Now you can really see the ROI. Whether it is an efficiency play to reduce, or increase first contact resolution or drive higher satisfaction, whatever it is. Now you can really measure that at that level, which your executive now needs to see. Now you're more likely to have the positive results, the 5%, because it's all about how you define that work.
And it's that change management. Oh, so go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, it exposes all the things that, if you do the journey map right, all the foundational elements that are missing, right? So it could be FAQs on a website, it could be marketing material, right? It could be the knowledge in the contact center, whatever email scripting, email response templates, right? All of those things that are broken or incomplete or not updated or wrong. If you do the journey map right, you should expose all those.
Yeah.
Because an AI project is fundamentally a data project.
Yep.
Right. And if you have your data in the right place, you have your knowledge in the right place, the AI tools should reflect that, and you should get some good responses and some good success with it. But I think what companies have done is they said, well, let's just throw it out there and see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, it just exposes all the holes that are in your operating model, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, and you pull them back. And there's so many examples of that. And I think that's where the 95% come from is let's throw it out there and see what sticks. Well, that's great if you're talking about maybe, doing some coding or doing some reporting internally, and seeing and playing with the tools to see if they work. But it's not so good when the customer has to sift through all the junk that's broken.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where, the tighter you can get to your, again, like you're describing, that commitment, that journey, the specifics to it. But when I meet with organizations who want to engage and think about this, that they're like, well, we need more, bigger, broader results. So why would we focus so narrow? And again, that's that incomplete view. Now, the reality is, once you get into, let's say, one journey and really start digging in, you're going to find other really good actionable opportunities within that, because the work alone, by kind of peeling back the onion and starting to dig into it, it's going to have multiple downstream impacts and effects positively if you do it right. But it's being able to engage at a level that you're going to make the kind of impact and build it little by little. It cannot be it's not magic. I mean, there's a lot of great, it's cool tech and it works well, and there's a lot of good stuff that's gonna happen. But again, to your point, you gotta build it. And I encourage most organizations I talk to about this, I encourage them, like, put boundaries on it very quickly and punt the customer over to a human the second they talk about anything that isn't already completely vetted through the process.
Right.
Because that epitome of garbage in, garbage out, right? And you just said it's a data issue. Well, it's not just garbage in, garbage out anymore. It's garbage in, spotlight on your garbage, elevated to the highest level of exposure, because AI will find it. And it's Murphy's Law. It's like, and then you're going to get sued, or you're going to, whatever. We got plenty of stories like that out there.
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say, it kind of goes back to, the late 90s, early 2000s, when, everyone was talking about, hey, we're going to automate all this front end stuff on websites, and e-commerce was going crazy. And call center businesses, BPOs, they're going to be out of business because we're going to automate everything. Right. But what you just described is it kicks the can down the road to the point of it's creating more of a problem if you don't really have that vetted out experience, and it puts the onus on the live agent to handle the more trickier, or the things that, or take more of the frustration of the customer on, which is, I think, going back to one of the things you said earlier about, most organizations, they just need to define kind of what it is and then be deliberate about it. But I believe 99% of the people get up in the morning and go, you know what, I'm going to go help our company do a better job. I want to do a better job for our customers. I want to do a better job and grow our company, whatever that is, and how they write themselves into that. But something gets in the way. It's not nefarious, but it is kind of process, and it's the responsibility, kind of laziness of organizations not really taking that piece of it on. And I've never seen a journey map that was wrong. I've always seen a journey map that's either in state of flux, or they're trying to figure out like what that right journey should be. But to your point, that exercise of actually coming back around and sitting down and going, all right, we did this at one time, brings more of those employees in, more of the people that are actually in the trenches with the customer on a day in, day out basis. Do you see companies getting away from involving the employees and the people that really like are at the crux of that customer experience kind of journey? Or do you see them, doing the different way and bringing them into these AI discussions and more of that, hey, the transformation or digital transformation projects that are happening?
I see both. But I mean, so let me hit both sides of that coin, if you will. On the negative side, I see a lot of organizations that they're actually approaching AI as an IT project, which is the worst thing that you can do. Because in that context, when IT is delivering a piece of technology, they're going to look at it through a lens very specific to their perspective. And for instance, I was working with an organization, and when IT was almost given this initiative and said, all right, this is an IT project. We're not going to involve the contact center. We're going to move the CX team, the research team, any of that. It would just deploy AI, from that perspective. Well, they measured the success based on channel containment. Strictly, how many calls did we avoid because of it? Well, because of that, they in that mindset, that meant they were designing it to keep people in making them angrier and angrier and angrier with the organization. But that's how they were designed, because that's how they were looking at that. And so for some organizations, that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking, the tech team and saying, all right, you're going to be making all the decisions here. On the flip side, what I am seeing, and like I was talking about with this resurgence or, of journey mapping, those that are looking at it, again, a little bit more holistically. It doesn't have to be like extremely holistic, but at least a little bit more holistically, and understanding the purpose of AI or whatever else, but also the risk of what we started talking about, which was the silos.
Right.
I mean, there is nothing I've seen that can break down silos and bring people together than working together on the journey and really seeing how from mobile to website to chat to chatbot to phone to, text, all these different channels. I've seen nothing that gets that team working together than looking across that journey.
That's great.
And understanding it more emotionally by saying, wow, I can't believe that this is how it's flowing. Again, so I go with the river. It's like, the biggest challenge right now usually is the space between the channels, not a channel and task, because we've gotten pretty good at that.
Right.
What we're really struggling with, both from a research and analytics perspective, is understanding, well, what's causing this bounce? Why are they having a bounce? What is that that's causing that to be more frustrated and making it more difficult, longer, and so forth? And that's what's, again, driving that. So, those organizations that are able to embrace the understanding that if you think about it in that context, I'm seeing them win, and I'm seeing them, really break those silos and drive the kind of change that they need to do. I've been coaching on this for years. My book For Rocks been out 2 years now. Creating rocks teams, these teams that go through and they're really focused on understanding the rocks in the journey, and they're from different aspects of the organization. And that starts to create the dialogue needed to both impact culturally, impact strategically, and ultimately impact operationally the results that you're driving to.
Yeah, we did a lot of work when John and I were at Best Buy. One of the things that we did to get the rest of BestBuy.com, because that's where we started in that organization, more connected to the gaps in the experience, was one holiday we had everyone take calls from the CEO of BestBuy.com all the way down, and that really opened up people's eyes to the tools that they had to use, the policy inconsistencies between .com and the stores, that whole end-to-end experience between .com and the stores, and returns and the whole 9 yards. And I think the other thing that John did was he actually recorded calls and put them on CDs. This is back in the CD
back when CDs were appropriate.
When CDs were still a thing, and he put them in the executives' mailboxes. And it's like, listen to these calls on the way home and let me know what you think. And they'd call and get really upset because they didn't like what they heard. And we'd be right behind it with, it's like, oh, if you want to fix this, this is how much it's going to cost. Because we already scoped it out. We already know the change we need to make. So if you want to fix this experience, this is what it's going to cost. It's not on the agent. It's on your tools and internal processes.
Yeah.
The agents always just deal with what they have, right? They make the best with all those gaps and try to bridge those gaps, and they get it. But when it comes to having the systems fix it, you're talking millions of dollars at sometimes, that drive 30, 40, 50,000 calls annually. Well, if you want to get those fixed, you're gonna have to spend the money.
Yeah.
So those are, besides for journey mapping, I think we found that those are great ways to
bringing them into our experience, or not making it, third removed story that somebody else is telling about it, because, we pounded our, heads against the wall sometimes to try to get funding for some of these fixes. And again, I think call center agents are some of the most resourceful people in the world, because they typically don't have all the tools and all the information in the right place. So they're alt tabbing and swiveling everywhere just to get things done. And it's gotten better to some degree. I think it's probably a little bit of information overload to some degree as well right now. But being able to give the leaders who are making the decisions a true and honest case of, here's what reality looks like when you shop the web, pick up the phone, do a text or whatever. Even as simple as some of our clients, we tell them, hey, in your executive meetings, play one call, do one interaction, so that everyone can discuss how they would have rated that experience. And you'll see 10, if there are 10 executives in a room, you'll see 10 different ways of doing it. And that starts the dialogue in the right way. And it gets back to your point, Sean, of, the why. Why should we be doing some of these things versus, really defining and making sure that we're all on the same page. And there is power in having alignment to the misalignment. And I think it does do things like it allows change management to happen much easier, allows marketing to do a much better job of, promoting and really doubling down on the things that are great about experience, because it's a people business in all reality. And all the other things that go in around it are just noise in the system. But for the most part, I think people just want to do a good job and do the right thing for their customers in most cases. So getting some of those barriers out of the way, I think, to your point and how you've written in your books, is really an important activity. Back to your customer experience councils were so big back in the 90s and early 2000s. And I think we're getting away from some of that, of bringing cross-functional teams together to review and talk about how they would rate that experience, because they're quite a bit different.
Yeah, and this is kind of the catch-22. It's like we think we're so evolved and AI is, and everything else, but the reality is your past is your future. I had a boss that used to say that, and it's just a different version, but we've got to go back to it. It kind of even comes back to, we have to stop thinking about surveys as the only way. We got to get back into having conversations. Focus groups and conversations, and AI can help you do it at scale. I actually know a couple of companies where their products provide an AI interviewer, and it goes out and it interviews a customer, creates dialogue. But however you're doing it, you're trying to get to an emotion. You want, like you described, the executives to have the same kind of emotion, or else you don't end up with the kind of response you're looking for. From them, because funding decisions, we like to think we're logical beings, but people are emotional beings, and that's what we look at. And so the more that we can get that emotion, that customer's emotion, in front of the employee or the leadership's emotions as well, that's when change can start to happen. And to your point, listening to calls, having them take calls, listening and watching interviews with customers. If customers jumping up and down and throwing their hands around there, that's a visceral reaction to someone watching that, when they're really upset about something. And those are the kinds of things that you're needing to tap into these days, for sure.
Yeah, I think there used to be companies that you could look towards to set that cadence. Like USAA was one of them. Everyone had to be like USAA, right? They had 90% or 89% NPS scores every year. Zappos was another one when Tony was still there, right? Everyone took calls in the first 2 weeks, no matter what role they took in the company. And I don't know if there's anybody we can point to anymore that sets the pace or sets the cadence for CX in any industry that I know of. It seems to be all homogenous now. Is that what you're finding, Sean?
Yeah, I think so. And the biggest challenge I think we have is it's so difficult. Because even if you get the emotional reaction, when it comes down, like you were talking about, well, here's the money you have to pay to fix this. And it's complex work. And then it has to go against every other project that's out there, which is half the reason why most of the kind of CX related projects never get funded, is it's not product related, or it's not, et cetera, et cetera. And, because the experience isn't just the contact center, or, it's not in a little box that people can just push it aside. This experience now has always been this way, but it's now being perceived, hopefully, by more organizations. How much, because the way I like to put it is, so I run a community, CX on the Rocks. So if anybody wants to take a look at it, it's cxontherocks.com. And it's a community, virtual community, free to join, where practitioners, consultants, leaders, we get together and we talk about these challenges with customer experience, because we like to say it's on the rocks right now. Layoffs are still happening. The experience scores we're seeing industry-wise are hitting all-time declines. But at the same time, on the rocks means let's build a foundation on the rocks. So some of these fundamental things that that we can build on, like listening to calls and things of that nature, are still there. But it's being able to drive that conversation at the right level with the right leadership to make the kind of impact we can today. And it does take everyone. But the reality comes in when everyone's responsible, no one's really responsible, right? I mean, that's the quote that's out there. And so it's so complex that businesses, they just kind of say that's almost too much to think about. Having to stitch this journey across every single kind of touch point we've got and fix it. Man, that's way too much. I'd rather
Are you saying that's hard work, Sean? Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
You got to do the work.
Come on, man.
Yeah, no, you could just throw an AI on top of it. It's going to fix everything. As we already said, will happen.
Yeah, I think it's that bully pulpit of, hey, let's let the tech do it, but it's somebody else's job, right? Yeah. And to your point, it's all. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, again, it's just, and I think that's why we struggle with it, and we want to, as humans, we want to consume something easy, and it's the same way. I just add even further, understanding the experience because of all of this is also even harder because again, you can't. Traditional surveys don't do it. So I like to say that there's two definitions of customer experience of CX. You've got the noun version of CX and you've got the verb of CX. The noun version is dying. It's the survey. It's the specific score. It's potentially a specific role or a specific department. This physical representation of CX is in a lot of trouble. Because of the complexities and everything else that's going on around it. But the verb of it, the customer's actual experience, is more important now than ever. The data is showing that. But being able to, understand that, even to know what that experience is, you've got to be able to not just pulling in surveys, but you got text analytics, you've got, data analytics on transactional level data, you've got weblog data, you've got other emotional data and sentiment that you're evaluating from these sources. You've got just all this that you're having to bring together to truly figure out where those biggest opportunities are. And so even those traditional teams that, and businesses that we're all about the customer experience. We're net promoter, all the way. They're not even, they can't do it anymore either. For a while they were doing really well because they had a North Star that was experience related, but even now it's not happening because nobody wants to take surveys anymore. Just like nobody wants to tip anymore. It's just too common. And it's just, it's become mind numbing. Plus you don't know if they're even doing anything with your feedback anyway. So,
Plus they want to treat it like a project where it's done versus a lifestyle where you're always doing it. Right. It's always happening. You're always changing. The customers are always reacting, and you have to continue to reinvent. As your company evolves, the customer evolves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's 30 minutes, so that goes by fast. Thanks.
We could go on and on and on, right?
Hey, I could do a 3-hour session if you want to keep going. No, I'm just kidding. Nobody out there wants to listen to us ramble on, but no, Jon and Scott, this was a great conversation, and it's an area where, again, I can see, if I look at my crystal ball and I look at this future, there are going to be people that get it wrong, but I actually fully believe we're going to come out of this better. And we're gonna understand and be able to do more to understand the experience and change it using AI. We just have to do it in the right way. And we've talked plenty of that. So
agreed. Thanks so much for your insights. We really appreciate it. Your books, Alignment on the Rocks and 4 Rocks, and cxrocks.com, right, for your community. Is that right?
CX on the Rocks. Yeah, cxontherocks.com.
Check it out, everybody. Scott, you want to take us out?
All right. Thanks for the time, all. Thanks, Sean. Take care.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
See you guys.